Hey guys, tonight we drift gently back to the winding roads and rustling reeds of ancient China, back to the glorious Tang Dynasty, a time of poets, emperors, and yes, ducks who delivered the mail. You're standing at the edge of Chang'an, the empire's grand capital, under a sky still bruised with early dawn. The city sleeps. Somewhere behind you, an official snores loudly beneath layers of silk. In front of you? A long, rutted road vanishing into river mist. You take a breath. The air smells like jasmine, horse sweat, and last night's pickled cabbage stew. You are, officially, a mail courier. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shift the satchel on your back. It's heavier than you expected. The leather creaks against your shoulder as the road begins to crunch beneath your straw sandals. The first leg of your journey takes you down the Imperial Highway. Built for exactly this kind of thing, but as you're about to discover, Imperial Highway in Tang, China is a bit like calling a goat path a luxury express lane. Tall bamboo sways overhead, hissing gently in the breeze. A cart rattles past, drawn by an ox that looks older than the dynasty itself. The driver gives you a pitying look, like he knows exactly how many miles you'll regret signing up for. The Tang Dynasty, around the 8th century, is in full bloom. Trade routes stretch from Persia to Korea, the court is flush with poetry and paranoia, and somewhere at the heart of it all is an emperor who expects messages to arrive faster than monsoon clouds. Hence, you pass under a carved stone arch. A calligraphed tablet above reads something like Post Road Number 7, may your feet not rot. Comforting. Along the way, you'll encounter yawns, official post stations built every 30 to 40 li, or about 12 miles. They're meant to support weary couriers like yourself with food, lodging, and ideally fewer fleas than the last guy's blanket. You'll soon learn the real trick is remembering which ones have edible dumplings and which ones disguise soup with a suspicious number of feathers. As you walk, the world begins to hum, distant insects, creaking trees, and the muffled squawk from a wicker cage at your side. Yes. You've been entrusted with the backup system, a duck. He looks at you with quiet judgment, as if to say, I have wings and I still have to walk this. Historians still argue whether these ducks were official parts of the postal service or just the bizarre pet project of a particularly eccentric provincial governor. But there's ample anecdotal evidence, buried in poetry and imperial records, that suggests ducks occasionally helped carry sealed pouches between river-connected posts. They were cheap, plentiful, and, unlike horses, couldn't be stolen and ridden off by bandits. Though you do wonder what kind of criminal would mug someone for a duck. You glance down. The duck is asleep. Chang'an disappears behind you as the road tilts slightly uphill. Early morning mist curls around your feet like lazy ghosts. A farmer ahead nods politely and mutters something about rain teeth. You're not sure what that means, but you nod solemnly and pretend you do. You try to remember your training, limited though it was. You were told to walk steadily, avoid eye contact with mounted officials, and under no circumstances open a scroll labeled urgent. Mostly because urgent messages were usually political, and political messages in the Tang Dynasty had a habit of getting people beheaded or reassigned to Mongolia. Your first stop is a modest post station, little more than a thatched roof and a steaming pot of questionable gruel. A sleepy attendant greets you with a grunt. He gestures at a logbook with a quill made from what looks suspiciously like the tail feather of a retired duck. You sign your name, first day courier. He grins. Welcome to the slowest job that must be done fast. Inside the station, a scroll exchange is happening. A senior courier, clearly seasoned, missing a few teeth, is debating whether a poetry scroll is more important than a weather report. They eventually decide to send both, then argue about which duck looks less tired. One of them gestures at your duck. New recruit? You nod. The duck opens one eye. It is unimpressed. You sit for a moment. Your legs already ache. The satchel pokes into your back in ways that feel both rude and medically unsound. You nibble on a piece of dried plum offered by a junior clerk, who informs you in hushed tones that last week, a scroll went missing, and someone swears they saw a goose flying away with it. Are geese allowed? You ask. Only if they pay taxes, he deadpans. Outside, the sky turns the soft pink of a peach blossom. It's time to move again. The next station is 20 li ahead, and rumor has it they serve rice cakes that don't taste like sadness. As you walk, you pass shrines tucked into hillside alcoves, small stone Buddhas smiling serenely through a fine mist of moss. You make a quiet wish that your duck doesn't run away, or worse, start quacking official secrets mid-route. It's been known to happen, or so the poems say. And still, the duck sleeps. Your journey is just beginning, and already you wonder if this was truly the safest path. But then again, you didn't sign up for safety. You signed up to deliver messages. And maybe, just maybe, to have a story worth telling when this is over. You're barely 3 miles from the first post station when it hits you, this satchel is cursed. It thumps with every step, bouncing rhythmically against your lower spine like a disgruntled woodpecker. The duck, cradled in a surprisingly well-ventilated side pouch, lets out a soft HRRK every time you jostle him. You are quickly learning that the glamour of Tang Dynasty Postal Service ends the moment the paperwork begins to sweat through your tunic. Your recruitment, if you can even call it that, was suspiciously casual. One moment you were delivering dumplings to a minor official, the next, you were volunteered as a postal footrunner due to your excellent forward posture. You suspect this was code for young and regrettably upright. A week later, you were assigned a uniform, mismatched, a duck, moody, and a vague directive to just head east, follow the signs, and don't drop anything important. You weren't given a map. But you were given a boiled egg, which you accidentally sat on. Now, bamboo arches overhead like green ribcages. You trudge along a sun-dappled path, duck muttering in his sleep, scrolls rustling gently at your hip. Ahead, a fork in the road. One path winds upward toward a hilly ridge, the other down into a fog-slick valley. You pause. There's a marker stone, its writing worn smooth by weather and generations of confused couriers. You tilt your head. It either says North Gate ahead or Soup House closed. Either way, your duck turns toward the valley path. You sigh. You better know what you're doing. You follow the duck. The road turns rocky. Roots claw across the path like lazy dragons. You catch your toe on something and almost tumble headfirst into a patch of moss. The duck is unfazed. He glides along beside you, wobbling with the slow confidence of someone who knows he'll never be asked to carry anything heavier than an imperial love letter. Historians still argue whether low-ranking postal runners like you were part of the prestigious Sichuan system or a more ragtag provincial variant called Jiasendao. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, a blend of local recruitment and distant imperial expectations. The Tang court loved order. The provinces, not so much. As you round a bend, you hear distant music, plucked strings and a thin flute drifting through the trees. A roadside shrine comes into view, its roof barely holding up against time. An old woman tends to incense sticks by the stone steps. She looks up, blinks slowly, and mutters, "Message boy." About time. You offer a confused bow. "I don't think I have anything for you." She nods, unconcerned. You never do. You continue on, the scent of sandalwood curling in your wake. The duck lets out a long, contemplative sigh. You try to ignore the rising humidity, the way your tunic clings like an overenthusiastic ant. You think about the training session, if it could be called that, where someone yelled stamina, before making you run around a courtyard filled with ornamental stones and judgmental chickens. It's here, on this winding woodland path, that you realize just how little preparation you were given. No compass. No route scroll. Not even a list of which towns might be unfriendly to duck-based messaging. At the next bend, you encounter a fellow courier, older, dustier, and chewing a root like it's fighting back. He raises a hand. First day? You nod. He points to your duck. Mine ran off 3 days ago. Joined a wedding procession. Never looked back. You nod again, unsure what to say to that. He adjusts his pack and squints. You heading to Stonebridge or the quiet Plum Outpost? You open your mouth. Pause. Glance at your duck. Yes. Good luck, he says, and disappears into the trees like a moderately sarcastic ghost. You keep walking. The sun climbs lazily, filtering through leaves in dappled gold. A snake crosses the path ahead, flicking its tongue in mild curiosity before vanishing into the undergrowth. You try not to see that as an omen. Eventually, you reach a small clearing where a post station shack sits askew, like it's had a long day and just wants to lean for a bit. A half-awake clerk inside greets you with a nod and a ceramic cup of something labeled tea, but which smells suspiciously of boiled lettuce. He rummages in a chest and hands you a new scroll to deliver, tied with crimson silk and stamped with the seal of a minor governor. The silk is sticky. You examine it. Where's this going? He shrugs. Somewhere important. Or it used to be. You tie it to your pouch, avoiding eye contact with the duck, who now looks distinctly judgmental. Back outside, the heat picks up. You tie a rag around your head and trudge onward, fantasizing about sitting in a pond and never moving again. Your duck seems to share the same dream. As the trees thin, the road broadens. You pass another courier post, this one larger and ringed with stone lanterns. A group of messengers lounges under a willow tree, one of them balancing a scroll on her forehead. They wave lazily, as if cheering you on in a race you didn't know you were losing. You wave back, but your hand is more of a flop. Every few steps, you start to hear a low bubbling sound, not from your stomach, though that's not far off. You follow the noise to a roadside creek, where a tub of cabbages floats merrily. Next to it, a middle-aged man in official robes waves a ladle. Tea? You take the cup. Thank you. He stares at your duck. What's his name? You blink. I didn't know I was supposed to name him. He nods sagely. Then he will name you. The duck, now fully awake, lets out a sharp squawk. Somewhere in your soul, you feel judged. The man leans in. They remember. Especially the ones who've seen the palace. You make a note not to anger the duck. Ever. As the sun begins its slow descent, your legs start to throb. You pass rice paddies dotted with bent-over farmers, who look up long enough to nod, then return to their meditative, muddy labor. You realize they know something you don't, how to stay in one place. But you have a job. A pouch of messages. A duck with secrets. And several more to go before sleep. You wake up face down in a millet field. Okay, not quite wake up, exactly. More like come to terms with the fact that you've accidentally drifted into a standing nap while leaning on your postal staff. The stalks sway gently around you, brushing your cheeks like sleepy fingers. The duck stands nearby in a kind of judgmental squat, staring at you like a disappointed supervisor who's considering filing a report. The road curves just ahead, past a cluster of roadside banyan trees where a farmer sits with his ox, sharing a bowl of radish soup. You nod in his direction as you shuffle past. He raises his eyebrows and murmurs, "Don't let the letters read you." You choose to interpret that as philosophical encouragement, not a threat. The official Tang postal routes, or yawns system, were organized with maddening precision. Every few li, roughly half a kilometer, there'd be a designated rest station, some as simple as a wooden lean-to with a bench, others resembling small temples to correspondence. Imperial couriers rode horses, you, however, ride hope, desperation, and increasingly sore calves. There's a stream ahead, its clear water tracing a quiet song over smooth stones. You kneel beside it, cupping water to your face, duck trailing behind. A sudden splash. You look over just in time to see him dive in with such poise. You wonder if he trained at the imperial baths. You lean back, letting the water run through your fingers. The sun, filtered through drifting clouds, glows gently. You take a breath. In moments like this, you forget the aching feet, the absurdity of being outwitted by a bird, and the looming weight of sealed scrolls you can't read. Historians still argue whether ducks were ever formally used in Tang postal communication or if this is simply one of many oddities from the Bianwen tales, popular narrative scrolls that blurred history, legend, and mildly intoxicated speculation. But you've stopped caring about scholarly debates. This duck is clearly on a mission. As you dry your face, the breeze carries a scent you can't place, sweet, smoky, like roasted chestnuts and aged ink. You follow it toward a market town nestled in the crook of a valley. The town is more a suggestion than a structure. A few houses lean against each other for support, their roof tiles sun-bleached and curling like dried fish skin. A woman tends a pot of lotus soup by the road. Children scatter as you approach, then circle back once they spot the duck. One of them points. Is he your boss? You open your mouth, pause, then nod solemnly. Yes. I just carry the bags. The child bows to the duck. You approach the local post station, a squat building shaded by a heavily flowering plum tree. Inside, a clerk with eyebrows like sleeping caterpillars peers over a scroll. Name? You give it. Route? You give that too, though you're not sure it's accurate. Duck registration? You blink. He came with the job. The clerk sighs. Unregulated birds again. Typical. He stamps a form, slides you a new scroll, and gestures toward a back door. Avoid the east path. Bandits pretending to be geographers. You thank him and move on. Outside, the duck pecks at a plum that's fallen to the ground. You resist the urge to take a bite, he found it first. The road leads into a bamboo grove so thick the sun can barely squeeze through. Your footsteps grow quiet on the mossy path. The duck waddles ahead, his orange feet perfectly silent. Here, it's easy to imagine you've stepped sideways in time. The chirp of a cicada. A flute played in the distance. A wooden gate half buried in vines, bearing the faded crest of a forgotten family. You feel like a whisper inside a painting. Then comes the rickety bridge. It spans a narrow gorge, with ropes made from woven hemp and a walkway of irregular planks. A sign hangs lopsided, 2 couriers at a time. 3 if one is small. You step on, feeling the bridge sway like a sleepy serpent. The duck waddles across without hesitation. Halfway through, the bridge creaks and you pause. Below, a trickling stream. In it, a fisherman glances up and waves. Don't worry, he calls, it only collapsed once this week. Comforting. You reach the far side and step onto solid earth like someone exiting a very polite nightmare. You glance at the duck. He looks pleased with himself. Your next stop is an abandoned scholar's house, now repurposed as a courier relay. The outside is elegant in a crumbling sort of way. Tiled eaves, latticed windows, calligraphy peeling from wooden beams. Inside, the musty scent of ancient ink and moth wings. You drop off one scroll, pick up another. The attendant, a man with 3 teeth and the serene gaze of someone who's seen at least 5 dynasties rise and fall, offers you a candied ginger and a proverb you don't quite understand. Even a duck forgets the pond when it rains inside. You thank him politely. Night is falling. The air turns cool, the shadows long. Fireflies blink along the edges of the trail. You light a paper lantern from your pack, the flame flickering inside like a heartbeat. Your duck settles into the crook of your arm, feathers fluffed against the evening chill. You think about the thousands of other couriers like you across the vast Tang Empire, some on horses, some on boats, some probably lost in the mountains arguing with goats. A web of messages, tying the empire together not with armies or swords, but with parchment and determination. You're not heroic. You're not important. But you are part of something that stretches beyond you, words carried across valleys, through forests, over bridges barely held together by ambition and rope. As the stars begin to emerge, you reach the outskirts of the next village. A bell chimes softly in the distance. Somewhere, incense burns. The duck snores quietly. You press forward, into the dark. The duck wakes up before you do. He's already paddling in a rain basin when you rub the sleep from your eyes. Morning mist clings to your hair like damp cobwebs, and your cloak smells like someone used it to wrap fermented tofu. You're sleeping beside a tea vendor's cart just outside the village, tucked under its awning like a very unprofitable produce display. The tea vendor eyes you with a mix of pity and amusement. Your duck paid for the lodging with a pebble, she says, handing you a small cup of chrysanthemum brew. I accept it out of respect. You raise the cup. He drives a hard bargain. She shrugs. He's punctual. Better than my cousin. You sip the tea. It's light and floral, tinged with something unplaceable, like the taste of clean linen drying in a courtyard. The sun peeks through the mist, gilding the tiled roofs and turning spiderwebs into tiny, trembling mandalas. Onward. You adjust your satchel, check your scrolls, and beckon the duck. He hops off the basin and waddles ahead like he owns the morning. A few children follow you for a while, singing a local rhyme that may or may not be about you. It goes something like, courier man walks with bird, says 10 words, forgets third. You decide not to take offense. The road out of the village is a muddy one, flanked by rice paddies reflecting the sky in 1,000 small, rippling mirrors. You pass a farmer up to his knees in the field. He raises a hand. South route? North detour, you answer. He nods. Good. South's full of tax collectors this week. You share a moment of mutual dread. The path narrows through a stretch of tall reeds. You hear a distant clatter, wheels on stone, and out of the mist rolls a curious sight, a two-wheeled cart pulled by goats, driven by a middle-aged woman wearing a bamboo hat wider than her shoulders. Postal sisterhood, she says, grinning. You exchange nods and she tosses you a rice cake as she passes. Watch for territorial geese past the creek. You thank her and add the rice cake to your growing collection of road food of mysterious origins. The Tang Empire was vast, stretching from the deserts of Central Asia to the coasts of modern-day Korea, and mail couriers came in all varieties. While imperial envoys had horse relays and official way stations, regional messengers like yourself were often left to navigate a maze of secondary paths, local alliances, and the occasional poetic insult carved into a tree. One such tree stands just ahead. It's an old pine, hunched and noble. Someone's etched a haiku into the bark, scroll and satchel creaks, rain comes swift without a map. Duck, why must you lead? You pause, smile, and take it as a sign that you're not the first one lost here. You reach a river crossing just as the rain begins, a soft drizzle that smells of earth and iron. The river is calm, its surface broken only by a single, absurdly large fish leaping at intervals as if to taunt the sky. There's a small ferry tied to a post, flat-bottomed, with a worn deck and a thatched awning. The ferryman greets you with a grunt, then gestures to a jar by the railing. Donation, he says. Or duck performance. You glance at your companion. The duck does a single, slow pirouette and bows. The ferryman nods. Good enough. As you drift across the river, the world softens. The water murmurs beneath the boat, the rain patters gently overhead, and the duck nestles at your feet, looking smug. You let your hand dangle over the edge, fingertips skimming the cold surface. Some historians argue the Tang postal routes were more mythologized than they were used by commoners. They point to gaps in the archaeological record, contradictory travel logs, and the sheer improbability of organized ducks. Others counter that the Tang were nothing if not ambitious and eccentric. This was a dynasty that once tried to categorize all known smells into a formal lexicon. If any civilization was going to draft waterfowl into public service, it was them. On the far bank, a sign welcomes you to Huajian County. It's painted in red lacquer and says, "Honored couriers. Please wipe your feet." The street ahead is paved, but barely. Market stalls line the way, selling spices, jade hairpins, pickled turnips, and once again, fermented tofu, which somehow smells even more aggressive than last time. You pause at a tea house marked with a blue flag. Inside, steam curls from a dozen porcelain cups and the low thrum of conversation fills the air like bees in a sunlit orchard. You check your scroll. The recipient is someone named Master Yun, philosopher-scribe of the regional court. He turns out to be exactly what you feared, hunched, frowning, and surrounded by documents so dry they might spontaneously combust from friction. His long eyebrows twitch as you approach. "From the capital?" he asks, not looking up. "From 5 post stations and a duck ago," you reply. He finally glances at you. Then at the duck. Then back at you. Interesting partnership. He does most of the scheduling, you deadpan. Master Yin nods slowly and accepts the scroll. He breaks the seal with a jade knife, reads the first line, then sighs with the weight of centuries. "It's a poem about tax reform," he mutters. Again. You leave him to his bureaucratic misery and head back into the rain. The duck leads you through the back lanes, past drying laundry, temple bells, and a man trying to sell authentic Tang Dynasty sunglasses made of polished slate. You suspect he's only half wrong. Finally, you reach the edge of town. The road forks again, one path leading uphill through terraced fields, the other down toward the river basin and a rumored village that only appears on alternate Tuesdays. The duck chooses the uphill path. Of course he does. You sigh, pull your cloak tighter, and follow. Your knees are beginning to whisper curses in Old Chinese. It's only midday, but your legs have written several resignation letters to your hips, and your boots are making wet squelching sounds that suggest they may evolve into amphibians if you don't give them a break. The uphill road twists like a drunken calligrapher's brushstroke, more scenic than efficient. To your left, rice terraces etched into the slope like giant green fingerprints. To your right, steep drop-offs and the occasional goat giving you judgmental side-eye, as if questioning your life choices. And somewhere ahead, past the fog and goat sass, lies your next destination, a forgotten hilltop monastery known for 2 things: tea strong enough to revive the dead and monks who swear they once trained a goose to recite Buddhist sutras. You hope at least one of those is still true. The duck is marching with alarming discipline, occasionally veering off to snap at grasshoppers. You get the feeling he's been here before. You wouldn't be surprised if he studied under the goose. As you climb, a sudden gust brings the scent of pine needles, incense, and distant rain. Then you hear it, bells. Soft, hollow, metallic, faint enough to be mistaken for a memory. It's the monastery. But before you can celebrate, the path becomes absurdly narrow, barely the width of your shoulders, and paved with stones polished by centuries of regret. You slip twice. The duck does not. He hops from stone to stone like a feathery mountain sage, pausing only to glance back and quack judgmentally. The monastery emerges from the mist like a daydream that forgot to dissolve. It's small, wooden, and crooked in the way that very old wisdom often is. Moss carpets the roof. Red lanterns sway from eaves. And sitting cross-legged on the steps is a monk with a beard so long it has its own personality. He smiles without opening his eyes. "Courier from the capital?" "From the capital's hangnail," you reply. He chuckles and gestures you forward. "We've been expecting you." You glance at the duck. Of course you have. You remove your boots at the door, releasing a bouquet of swamp and despair. The monk politely pretends not to notice. Inside, the monastery is warm and dimly lit, with wooden beams etched in scripture and a large copper urn bubbling over a brazier. The air smells of sandalwood, boiled ginger, and something indefinably ancient. You're led to a low table, where another monk offers you a bowl of tea so dark it's nearly black, with an aroma of roasted plum and memory loss. You take a cautious sip, and immediately feel your soul sit up straighter. The bearded monk introduces himself as Brother Feng. He speaks slowly, as if every word must be invited to leave his mouth. This hill has been a waypoint for messengers for many reigns, he says. We keep records. He gestures to a wall scroll that reads, in graceful brushstrokes, Courier #1-349 arrived soaked and screaming about bamboo bandits. You nod respectfully. I stand on the shoulders of great whiners. Brother Feng chuckles. Your duck may rest in the courtyard. He will be fed. As if summoned, a young novice appears holding a shallow ceramic dish filled with grain. The duck follows him with an air of professional detachment. While your companion dines al fresco, you open your satchel and produce the scroll for Brother Feng. He reads it in silence, his brows knitting. When he finishes, he folds it and bows. Instructions for the temple census, he says. It seems the government wishes to know how many monks eat garlic. You shrug. They've done stranger. True, he says. During Emperor Zhongzong's reign, they once demanded we register all bald heads. We simply said yes. While the monk prepares your return letter, likely a very polite way of saying please mind your own Confucian business, you're given time to rest. A novice leads you to a small guest room with paper walls, a tatami mat, and a view of the valley below. You lie down, letting your muscles unclench one by one. Through the open window, a breeze slips in, bringing with it the distant sounds of temple bells and birds arguing over philosophy. You drift into a half-sleep where your dreams involve bureaucracy, ducks in tiny hats, and a talking scroll that refuses to be read unless sung. You're awakened gently by a soft knock. It's dusk. Brother Feng stands outside, holding the sealed scroll and a parcel wrapped in oilskin. This is for the postmaster, he says. And this, he offers the bundle, is for you. A gift. You unwrap it to find a small bamboo flask filled with the dark tea, and a scroll of proverbs written in poetic sarcasm. One reads, the mountain is tall, the road is long, but your duck seems unconcerned. You smile. He usually is. As you lace up your boots, which now resemble pickled raisins, the monk bows once more. May the road rise to meet your soles, and may your messages not be poetry. With the duck at your heels, you descend the hill under a silvering sky. The stars begin to prick through the dusk like gossip through silence. You feel calmer, lighter, perhaps from the tea, or the nap, or the fact that the duck seems to be humming. You reach a fork in the trail, marked by an ancient shrine half swallowed by ivy. Someone's left offerings, dried lotus seeds, a feather, and what looks like a small origami ox. You pause to add a button from your coat, a sacrifice of minor inconvenience. Historians still argue whether monasteries like this actually served as official postal relay points. Some claim it's more likely they were spiritual rest stops, places of food and reflection, not bureaucracy. Others believe they played a dual role, especially during times of civil unrest, when messages moved more safely under the protection of monks than soldiers. Whatever the truth, the hill fades behind you like a dream retreating from daylight. You and your duck press onward, stomach full, scrolls delivered, and boots slightly less wet. But the road is long. And the empire still waits. The stars blink lazily overhead as you descend into the valley, your breath fogging the cool evening air. The duck plods beside you, having adopted a slightly smug gait since being fed by monks and possibly achieving enlightenment. The moon glows like a polished rice bowl in the sky. Crickets chirp with metronomic dedication. Somewhere in the distance, a bamboo flute sighs out a melancholy melody, probably a shepherd serenading his goats, or a ghost with a solid sense of rhythm. You reach a clearing by a narrow river, its waters so still they reflect constellations you swear didn't exist earlier. You pause to refill your canteen, the duck waddling up to sip from the edge. He dips his beak, then stares into the water as if pondering the meaning of reflection. Or perhaps just checking out his own profile. Tonight, you sleep under a willow tree with branches that trail into the stream like fingers stirring soup. Your cloak becomes a blanket, your satchel a pillow. The duck curls into a feathery comma and drifts off before you do. Morning wakes you with dew on your nose and a beetle in your sleeve. The duck already looks mildly annoyed that you've slept this long. You continue your route along the valley floor, flanked by reed fields and rice paddies, where farmers in wide-brimmed hats wave as you pass. You wave back. One offers you a taro dumpling the size of your fist. You consider marrying them. By midday, you arrive at an unexpected detour. A ferry crossing. The bridge ahead has been removed, deliberately, judging by the very official in maintenance banner tied with imperial knots across its ghostly remains. A ferryman naps under a tarp, snoring into his beard. His boat is tied lazily to a post, gently bumping the dock as if reminding him to wake up eventually. You clear your throat. He doesn't stir. You stomp once. He snorts, opens one eye, and gestures vaguely toward the boat. Courier? You nod. He nods back. Duck travels free. The journey across the river is slow. The boat creaks with every ripple. A water buffalo watches you from the opposite bank, chewing grass like it's judging your life choices. Halfway across, the ferryman squints at you. Got any imperial secrets in that satchel? Only gossip, you reply. Best kind, he says, and returns to napping with his eyes open. When you disembark, the duck hops off and immediately begins pecking at something invisible in the mud. You glance up to find your next stop just visible beyond the river, a relay station nestled beside a banyan tree that's wider than your bedroom back home. The station is managed by a woman named Lou, who has a streak of gray in her hair and the posture of someone who has seen every type of letter, from love poems to court summons, and treats them all with the same amount of tea and mild eye rolling. Lou takes your scroll, examines the seal, and hands you a cup of barley tea without a word. Long route today, you say. She raises an eyebrow. Longer if you get distracted. She disappears inside, re-emerging with a leather pouch and 2 small bamboo cylinders sealed with red wax. For the herbalist in Jinling, she says. And a reply for the prefect of Meishan. Neither are time-sensitive, unless you count the ego of a minor nobleman. You tuck the parcels into your satchel. The duck waddles over and pecks at your boot, reminding you both who's truly in charge of your timeline. As you prepare to leave, Lou points toward the horizon. Take the path through the pepper forest. It smells better, and the wind's with you. Anything I should avoid? Don't insult the scarecrows. Local superstition. You promise to keep your sarcasm to yourself. The pepper forest is a delightfully surreal stretch of land where the air tingles with the scent of spice, and even the birds sound mildly surprised to exist. Tiny red peppercorns dangle from branches like festive beads, and the ground crunches faintly beneath your feet. You spot a scarecrow perched atop a pole, its head made from a gourd, its cloak tattered but noble. You nod politely as you pass. The duck, however, lets out a derisive quack. Immediately, a breeze picks up, and several peppercorns fall onto your head like culinary raindrops. You glance at the scarecrow. Its gourd face seems just a bit more judgmental than before. Historians still argue whether scarecrows in Tang Dynasty fields were merely for birds or also considered minor protective spirits. Some records hint at rituals performed at the base of poles, others dismiss it as rural nonsense. You're not taking chances. You reach a small pavilion near sunset, a resting post built by a retired postmaster who, legend claims, once walked the entire empire barefoot for a lost letter. The structure is simple. A roof, a bench, and a stone plaque etched with the phrase, "May your words reach kind ears." You sit. The duck climbs onto the bench and stretches one wing like he's about to deliver a lecture. Instead, he tucks it back in and settles down. You eat a rice ball wrapped in lotus leaf. The filling is sour plum and shredded yam, unexpected, but not unpleasant. You offer the duck a pinch of sesame cake. He sniffs it, then eats it sideways, like a typewriter returning to margin. In the distance, lanterns begin to glow in scattered villages. You imagine the people there, laughing over soup, folding laundry, grumbling about taxes, telling bedtime stories about monks and ducks and postal heroes. You breathe in the pepper-scented twilight. Tomorrow, you'll reach Jinling. But tonight, under the open sky, you sleep beside a duck and a scarecrow you have now mentally apologized to, just in case. Morning slides in gently, as if not wanting to disturb you or the duck, who has managed to wedge himself half under the bench during the night and now resembles a rolled-up scroll of fluff. The sky is painted in slow-moving pastels, all pink blush and peach cream, with the occasional streak of lavender cloud as if the heavens themselves had dipped a brush into warm tea. You stretch, rub your eyes, and offer the duck a breakfast of leftover sesame cake. He eyes it, then burps lightly. It's unclear whether that's a no or a deeply personal statement. You press onward, now threading your way along a ridge lined with persimmon trees. Their orange globes dangle from branches like suspended moons, their sweetness hanging heavy in the air. One falls beside you with a soft plop, and you pocket it for later. For all the legendary efficiency of the Tang postal system, snack breaks were considered sacred. As you descend from the ridge, the road grows wider, edged with stone markers every 100 steps, standard imperial infrastructure. These markers list the distance to major towns, but also, curiously, include poetry from board officials and passing scholars. One stone reads, "Rainy day. Forgot umbrella. Duck bit me. Still on schedule." A kindred spirit, perhaps. The terrain shifts again as you enter the marshy lowlands around Jinling, a place known equally for its scholars and its mosquitoes. You wrap a scarf around your neck in advance. The duck seems unbothered, likely due to his natural oil-slick defense system. You try not to envy his evolutionary advantages. A few miles from the city walls, you stop at a way station that is, to your surprise, operated by a team of older children, apprentices in the Imperial Courier Academy. They bow awkwardly, elbowing one another and whispering behind sleeves about the legendary duck rider. "I'm not a rider," you explain. "He just follows me. Against my will." One kid hands you a scroll. "This one's from a poet. Needs to get to Luoyang." Another adds, "He says it's urgent but not urgent. More like emotionally urgent." You nod solemnly. Emotional urgency is valid. You accept the scroll, wrap it in protective silk, and gently tuck it into the waterproof section of your satchel. A pigeon, presumably theirs, watches you from a rooftop beam, glaring like you've just usurped its job. You tip your hat in mutual respect. As you near the southern gate of Jinling, your duck companion becomes visibly tense. He flattens out slightly, his gait more cautious. You glance down. "Don't like cities?" He responds with a wary side eye, which might mean yes or might just be duck for never trust anyone who sells steamed tofu on the street. Jinling rises before you in a sweep of ivory walls, sloped rooftops, and bridges that stitch its waterways together like embroidery on a silk robe. The city pulses with motion, wheelbarrows creaking, merchants shouting prices, paper parasols bobbing like bright jellyfish in a human sea. You push through the gate, nodding to the sleepy guards who barely register your presence. Inside, the smells of cinnamon oil, roast chestnuts, pickled turnip, and ink hang thick in the morning air. A man nearby hawks scrolls of questionable Confucian wisdom, while another plays a two-stringed arrow with unexpected skill. You pass a bamboo booth where a court scribe is having his eyebrows trimmed by a barber who also seems to be reciting legal codes. It's all very efficient. Your destination, the herbalist. You follow a narrow street lined with lanterns shaped like cranes, each one bearing delicate red characters. You stop in front of a shop with a carved turtle above the doorway, a good omen for longevity and a not-so-subtle boast about their ginseng inventory. The door chimes gently as you step inside. The shop smells of dried citrus peel, camphor, and something else you can't quite place, possibly aged yak hoof. It's probably medicinal. The herbalist, an old woman named Bao, barely looks up as you enter. She's sorting tiny berries into porcelain bowls with the precision of someone playing celestial chess. "Courier," she says without looking. You nod. Message from the southern monastery. She holds out a hand, and you pass over the bamboo tube. She inspects the wax seal, then places it on a shelf that's so full it could be classified as a literary hazard. She points a curved finger at you. Wait. She disappears behind a silk curtain. You hear drawers opening, the rattling of tiny glass jars, and one loud sneeze. She returns with a small cloth pouch and hands it to you. Give this to the fairy woman at Seong Ford. She has a bad knee and won't admit it. You nod, tucking the pouch into your ever-growing collection of not your problems but now they are. Bao peers over her spectacles at your duck. He has low chi. You blink. Is that bad? Just means he'll nap more. But he's loyal. Good sign. The duck nods as if in agreement, then climbs onto a basket of dried lotus pods and falls instantly asleep. You consider joining him. But duty, and Bao's pointed cough, propel you back into the sunlight. Outside, the city now hums at full volume. You pass a calligrapher inscribing fortunes on fans, a woman spinning thread from lotus silk, and a juggler attempting to entertain a baby who seems deeply unimpressed. Historians still argue whether lotus silk was actually common in Tang Dynasty Jinling or more of an imperial novelty. Records are vague, and the sole surviving bolt of it might be a forgery. Still, it looks soft enough to sleep in. You buy a rice cake shaped like a rabbit. It tastes mostly like bean paste and ambition. You and the duck exit the city by the eastern road, walking into the noon sun. You pause at a shrine just past the final gate, leaving behind a coin and a strip of mulberry bark etched with a traveler's prayer. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of pine and the distant crackle of fireworks, some festival you didn't get to attend. No matter. You have miles to go, a duck to watch, and a minor noble's emotions to deliver. You walk on. You travel eastward now, leaving the bustle of Jinling behind you like an echo that slowly gets absorbed into the silence of the surrounding woods. The road turns to packed earth, soft and springy underfoot, shaded by an archway of ginkgo and pine trees. The duck waddles beside you, newly energized from his nap in the herbalist's shop, though he occasionally stops to peck suspiciously at leaves that don't appear to be doing anything wrong. Somewhere in the trees above, a warbler sings a lazy tune. It sounds like he's trying to remember the melody halfway through, and then just gives up. Relatable. You pass an elderly man fishing in a stream, his pole held in one hand, a noodle bowl balanced expertly in the other. He doesn't look up as you greet him, but mutters something like, "Still faster than ducks." It's unclear if he means mail delivery or the fishing. Your next destination is Seong Ford. A narrow crossing point where the river runs wide and shallow, perfect for ferries and gossip. According to Bao the herbalist, a fairy woman named Shun handles most of the local traffic, and, if the pouch in your satchel is any clue, also suffers from something called stubborn knee syndrome. The river appears as a ribbon of glinting silver ahead. You hear it before you see it. Water lapping against smooth stones, oars knocking against hulls, and the muffled voices of merchants bartering with a laziness only possible when both sides know they're stuck waiting on the same ferry. The dock is little more than a floating platform tied to a crooked tree. Several water buffalo lounge nearby, one of them wearing what appears to be a child's sun hat. He seems deeply comfortable with his fashion choices. The fairy woman, Shun, presumably, stands at the edge of the water, pole in hand, brow furrowed. Her boat is long, flat-bottomed, and covered with a canopy of rush mats. You approach, duck in tow. "You're the courier?" she asks without turning. "Depends who's asking." She turns, squints, and frowns at your duck. "That thing better not poop in my boat." He makes no promises. She grunts. You hand her the pouch from Bao. She opens it, sniffs once, and nods. About time. That woman's tonics smell like fermented socks, but they work. You climb aboard, finding a spot near the bow. The duck flops down beside you with the grace of a dropped pillow. As the boat pushes off, you watch the landscape ripple, fields of millet swaying in the breeze, fishermen hauling nets, and distant mountains that look like they're trying to doze off beneath the clouds. Shun doesn't talk much during the crossing, which suits your mood. The duck begins softly honking to himself, perhaps rehearsing his next protest about the journey. Or composing a haiku. Difficult to tell. As you drift downriver, she finally speaks. Ever meet the northern couriers? You shake your head. They've got hawks. You raise an eyebrow. Big ones. Smart. They say one of them once intercepted a scroll midair. Between two pigeons. Sounds unlikely. She shrugs. So does mail by duck, but here you are. Historians still argue whether hawk-based delivery systems ever functioned in the Tang Dynasty or whether they were merely poetic embellishments in court records. A 9th-century bureaucrat once wrote, "The hawk pierces the heavens, letter tied with silk," but this may have referred to a dream he had after drinking too much plum wine. As the ferry glides to the opposite bank, you spot something odd. A small group of children standing in formation, each holding a fan with a different Chinese character on it. One holds wind, another fish, and so on. You ask Shun. School pageant, she mutters. Theme is elements that don't pay taxes. She thumps the boat against the shore. You step off, thanking her. The duck makes a show of leaving as if disembarking a royal barge. You don't stop him. Your path now curves through bamboo groves, their stalks creaking gently in the breeze like gossiping grandmothers. Shafts of sunlight slant between the leaves, giving everything a golden, almost syrupy glow. You pass a shrine to the river goddess. Someone's left a slice of lotus root cake and a tiny, embroidered slipper. You resist the urge to try the cake. Eventually, you reach a fork in the road. One way leads toward your next drop-off point. An artist's retreat in the foothills where a retired court painter now spends his days attempting to capture the shape of music. The other leads to a rest stop. The duck takes a sharp left toward the rest stop. You sigh. Fine. You win this time. The rest stop is surprisingly luxurious by Tang standards. A pavilion with carved beams, stone benches that don't wobble, and an attendant who offers tea brewed with chrysanthemum and hints of ginger. You sit under a wisteria vine and sip, watching as the duck dunks his head repeatedly into a koi pond, presumably to cool off or achieve enlightenment. A passing merchant recognizes your courier satchel and offers you a riddle in exchange for dried figs. 4 legs in the morning, 2 in the noon, 3 in the eve, he begins. Man, you reply, reflexively. He frowns. You've heard that one. Just once or twice. He hands you the figs anyway. Still valid, he says, and ambles off. You rest for a while, lulled by the warmth and the sound of bees drowsily bumbling from blossom to blossom. A squirrel drops a nut on your head. The duck laughs. Or sneezes. Hard to say. Eventually, you rise and stretch. The satchel pulls slightly on your shoulder, it's gotten heavier with emotion-laden scrolls and herbal pouches and an increasing awareness that this journey, while noble, is oddly filled with ducks and snacks. Still, the foothills call. And your next recipient, the painter, has a history of slipping secret political commentary into his landscapes. So of course, his letters are delivered by couriers and not the standard pigeon network. Pigeons have no sense of nuance. The duck nips at your heel. Time to move. You walk on, into the late afternoon sun, the breeze behind you, and the sweet taste of ginger tea still lingering on your tongue. The sun starts to dip low in the sky as you and your now distracted companion, the duck, continue along the winding path that leads toward the foothills. You pass through stretches of wheat and barley, the scent of the harvest thick in the air. The ripened grain rustles as a soft breeze brushes through it, sounding almost like a distant river, calming, constant, familiar. As you round a corner, a sharp jolt of excitement courses through the air. Right there in front of you, hidden behind a grove of mulberry trees, is a large, weathered stone house. Its once splendid roof has sagged with age, and the windows are more shuttered than open. But you've found your destination, the artist's retreat. The duck, naturally, takes the lead, waddling ahead with an air of purpose that suggests he's been here before. Or perhaps he's just making a habit of asserting dominance wherever he goes. You call after him, but he's having none of it. As you approach the front door, you can't help but wonder what might be waiting inside. The painter who resides here is a mystery, someone whose work you've heard about in hushed tones, mostly from scholars who don't quite understand it, but admire it anyway. His paintings are strange and hypnotic, often filled with swirling abstract shapes and ethereal landscapes that seem to speak of something larger. Some even say he's gone mad in his old age. Others claim he's a genius. A misunderstood artist with a mind that sees the world as no one else does. Regardless, you've come to deliver a very specific letter that you know he's been expecting. He's a man of eccentric tastes, and the delivery of such a letter must be handled with care. You raise your hand to knock, but the door swings open before you can touch it. The figure that stands before you is tall, thin, and dressed in layers of worn, but surprisingly clean, cloth. His hair is a wild, silver mess, a stark contrast to the calm, almost eerie stillness of his face. He looks you up and down, then glances at the duck, who is, for some reason, attempting to balance a pinecone on his head. "You're here for the letter," the painter says in a voice that cracks like dry parchment. It's not a question, but a statement. You nod, reaching into your satchel and pulling out the scroll. His eyes flicker to the duck for a second time, and this time, you can tell that even he is unsure of what to make of your feathered companion. "Is the duck yours?" he asks with a raised eyebrow. "It's a long story," you reply, keeping your tone light, though the truth of it all still feels absurd. The duck honks in agreement, and you wonder for a moment if he's truly the cause of all your strange adventures. He takes the letter from you, unsealing it with the practiced hand of someone who's been reading for decades. As he reads, you glance around the room. The walls are covered in what looks like a haphazard collection of abstract art, landscapes that might represent the peaks of distant mountains or the waves of the great sea, but something in the brushstrokes feels off. The colors are wild, uncontained, and the shapes seem to pulse with an energy that makes you slightly dizzy. "You've been here before, haven't you?" you ask, your voice soft as you try to make sense of the space around you. The painter looks up from the letter, his eyes narrowing, not in anger but curiosity. "Once. Many years ago." He pauses, then adds, "Not everyone makes it out unchanged." You're not sure whether he's referring to the paintings or the letter. Perhaps both. The duck seems to have made his way onto a table, inspecting a nearby vase with keen interest, as though looking for his next artistic inspiration. "Does it happen often?" you ask, more out of curiosity than anything else. "Not often enough." His voice trails off, his eyes shifting back to the letter in his hands. "You should stay for the evening. The night is when the true magic of these lands reveals itself." You glance at the duck, who is now carefully examining the painter's collection of brushes. You glance back at the man. "You don't mind, then?" He laughs, a sound that, for a moment, seems almost human, almost comforting. "I'm used to strange company." And so, without another word, he leads you into the heart of his abode, a place that seems less like a house and more like an extension of his mind, twisted, ethereal, and yet impossibly inviting. A place where time doesn't seem to exist. There's something about this room, the faded wood beams above, the low lanterns that cast soft light across the room's many objects, that feels both familiar and foreign at once. The duck, now comfortably perched on a cushion, seems content to stay close. You, on the other hand, are captivated by the stories hidden in the walls. Every corner of the room tells a story, perhaps from the past or the future, or perhaps from a realm that only the artist understands. As the evening stretches on, the painter shows you his work, new pieces that he's been working on for years, and old ones that speak of a past long gone. You learn that his paintings are not just representations of reality, they are windows into other worlds. Worlds that he has visited, or perhaps merely imagined. Each piece seems to tell a story, not with words, but with color and form, offering glimpses into the unknown. Somehow, as you sit there, a quiet understanding settles between you and the duck. It's as though the journey has led to this moment, the stillness of the room, the flickering light of the lanterns, and the whispered stories of a man who has seen more than he was meant to. The world outside is growing darker, and you know that tomorrow will bring another day of deliveries, another set of destinations. But for tonight, here, with this strange artist and your ever-present companion, it feels as though time has slowed just enough to let you catch your breath. The duck seems to agree. He lets out a soft quack, as though signaling the end of the day's events. And with that, you settle in for a peaceful night, unsure of what tomorrow will bring, but content to be here, in this moment, with the stories that only seem to deepen as the night stretches on. The morning mist spills across the foothills like a lazy cat, curling around rocks and tree trunks, blurring the boundary between ground and sky. You bid farewell to the painter, who is now deeply immersed in a new scroll he insists was whispered into his dreams by a passing mountain breeze. He doesn't look up as you depart, but he does hand you a bundle of dry ink sticks and a scroll sealed in gold lacquer. For a court scribe in Xiong'an, he mutters. And don't read it, unless you want to be cursed with creative block. Noted. You tuck it gently into your pouch, beside Bao's herbal satchel, the noble's love poem, and the mysteriously soggy scroll that still hasn't stopped leaking somewhere near the bottom. The duck waddles beside you, clearly energized by something, perhaps the fresh air, perhaps the leftover persimmon he found in the artist's workshop. He refuses to say. The trail ahead dips and swerves like a river trying to remember its path. You follow it into a patch of dense pine forest, where needles rain softly from above and your footsteps are muffled like secrets in a library. You've gone perhaps a li and a half before you spot something unusual, two men squatting beside the trail, inspecting a scroll with theatrical seriousness. They wear faded uniforms that once might have been official robes, now sun-bleached and patched at the knees. One is holding a map upside down. They glance up as you approach, their faces lighting with a strange combination of relief and opportunism. Ah. Courier, says the taller one. Just the person we needed. You pause. Needed for what, exactly? We're scholars, says the shorter one, who has the energy of a raccoon who's read too many books and slept too little. Traveling scholars. Studying courier patterns. For academic purposes. Is that why you're wearing half an official seal and a belt made of twine? Yes, he says, without shame. You glance at the duck. He stares at them, unimpressed. We're mapping postal routes for the Imperial Archive, the taller one explains, waving the upside-down scroll. You wouldn't happen to know if there's a rest station between here and June Pass? You hesitate. Maybe. If it hasn't been relocated. Or burned down. Or turned into a tofu stand. They nod solemnly. So it's still operational. You edge past them. I should really, wait, the shorter scholar fumbles in his satchel and pulls out a small pouch. For your trouble. Inside are 3 coins, a beetle shell, and a poem written in incredibly tiny calligraphy on a sliver of silk. You take it. Appreciated. Safe travels, they call after you. Avoid the east slope if you value your knees. You don't ask for clarification. You just walk faster. Historians still argue whether so-called field scholars were part of official Tang information-gathering efforts or simply well-dressed opportunists with elaborate excuses. Some accounts suggest they were occasionally recruited by prefectures to assess road quality and postal station readiness. Others imply they were usually just failed exam candidates too clever to starve quietly. Back on the trail, the terrain steepens, and you find yourself winding through switchbacks carved directly into stone. A waterfall chatters beside the path, and the sound blends with birdsong until it becomes a sort of natural music that follows you uphill. And that's when it happens. The scroll leaks. Not metaphorically. Literally. You feel it first, the slow, cold seep of moisture against your hip. Then comes the smell, part floral, part vinegar, part panic. You yank open the satchel and find that one of your scrolls, one of the less important ones, has split slightly at the edge, and inside was apparently soaked in perfumed water. The duck gags. You almost do too. You stop beside a fallen log and begin carefully unpacking the satchel, checking each message. Most are fine, dry, intact, and blissfully neutral in scent. But this one is soaked. The ink has begun to run, the characters swirling like drunken dancers on festival night. You sit in the moss and hold it in both hands, unsure what to do. You can't read it, it's sealed. But something about the label catches your eye. The name on the outer wrapping is unfamiliar, but the title is clear, regarding the third poem sent from the Ministry of Rights. A poetry scroll. Of course. There's a long and storied tradition in the Tang bureaucracy of using poetry as both communication and insult. Diplomats, minor nobles, and especially mid-ranking court officials were notorious for embedding passive-aggressive critiques into couplets and metaphors. If this scroll was meant for one such exchange, and it arrives smudged, it could be seen as a deliberate slight. You look at the duck. He shrugs, which somehow feels both encouraging and accusatory. After some thought, you decide to wrap it again, tightly, with oilcloth from your emergency kit, and tag it with a note. Water damage incurred due to sudden weather conditions. Message content preserved to best of courier's ability. It's mostly true. Ish. With your satchel repacked and the duck back in formation, you climb again. The trail is now flanked by tall stones carved with prayers, most of them worn down into riddles. You pass one that reads, "If the wind forgets its direction, will the message still arrive?" You hope so. Ahead, the forest opens onto a mountain ridge that gives you a full view of the valley below. It's stunning, mist coiled around the hills, terraced fields shining like scales, and the long ribbon of the postal road stretching toward the horizon. You breathe in deeply, letting the view settle inside you. The duck quacks softly beside you, and you both take a moment to enjoy the quiet. But only a moment. Because as you begin your descent, a soft rustle in the underbrush catches your attention. Then another. You freeze. A low grunt echoes through the trees. And then, out of the ferns, steps a wild boar the size of a tea cart. You and the boar lock eyes. The duck flattens against the path. You back away slowly. The boar snorts once, then, blessedly, decides you're not worth the trouble and lumbers off into the brush. Probably has more urgent scrolls to deliver. You release the breath you didn't realize you were holding. "Let's not write about that one," you whisper to the duck. He nods. And just like that, the road beckons again. You descend from the ridge with an extra bit of caution now, one eye on the winding path, the other half watching the foliage for any more surprise wildlife with poor social skills. The duck, as ever, is entirely unbothered. He struts ahead, pecking casually at stones and discarded seed husks, like a traveler with no fear of destiny or detours. The valley below hums with life. A patchwork of fields and small hamlets unfolds in every direction. Plumes of cook fire smoke rising here and there, voices carried lazily across the wind. You pass a farmer leading an ox who offers you a toothless grin and a cryptic greeting. Watch the sky, when the cranes fly low, the fish sing lies. You nod, because it feels rude not to. Further down the slope, you begin to hear a distant commotion. Raised voices, not in anger, but in the particular volume used for arguing about things that don't matter but feel like they do. You round a bend and find a group of villagers gathered in front of a roadside shrine, pointing at a duck. Not your duck. This one is standing atop the shrine roof, flapping wildly and refusing to come down. "He stole it," one man shouts. "That duck has my mother's comb." "He found it," argues a woman with a basket of scallions. Finders keepers. As you edge closer, the villagers notice your duck and fall silent. All eyes turn to you. "Another one," someone whispers. "It's a sign." You smile weakly. "We're just passing through." A child tugs your sleeve. Is your duck the messenger duck? You hesitate. One of them. The crowd collectively exhales. The scallion woman claps her hands. Then perhaps you can retrieve ours. Before you can protest, they produce a ladder and several pieces of dried fish, bribes, apparently. You approach the shrine, climb carefully, and attempt to reason with the rooftop duck, who eyes you with suspicion and possible existential dread. Come on, you whisper. Let's not make this a thing. After several awkward moments and one close call involving your balance and a wobbly roof tile, the duck relents. You descend victorious, comb in hand. The crowd erupts in polite applause. Your duck watches all this with the weary gaze of a professional annoyed by amateurs. The grateful villagers offer you a small meal, sticky rice wrapped in bamboo leaf and a cup of sweet chrysanthemum tea. You share it with the duck, who declines the rice but enthusiastically dunks his beak in your tea. As you prepare to leave, the shrine keeper presses a small talisman into your palm, a carved jade sliver shaped like a feather. For safe journeys, she says. And to ward off any spirits pretending to be officials. You thank her, wondering what kind of life experiences led to the creation of that phrase. Back on the road, your boots squish faintly with each step. The terrain flattens, and the sky opens wide above you. Cirrus clouds stretch across the blue like lazy ink strokes, and the sun casts long shadows from the willow trees lining the path. And then you hear it, a voice. Faint at first, but growing clearer. Someone is reciting poetry. You follow the sound until you come upon a courier sitting beneath a cypress tree, scroll open on her lap, lips moving in quiet rhythm. She looks up as you approach, smiling. Verse practice, she explains. Makes the miles pass faster. You nod and sit beside her. She offers you half a dried apricot. I'm May, she says, brushing dust off her trousers. From the western route. You introduce yourself and the duck, who is already eyeing her rations with clinical interest. You swap stories, the treacherous boar, the rooftop duck, the soggy scroll. She tells you about a sandstorm near Dunhuang that turned her tent into a kite and a haunted tea shop that only appeared during full moons. Historians still argue, she adds with a grin, whether I made that one up. You sit in companionable silence for a while, watching a flock of cranes glide overhead. They're flying low, she says. That means something. You look at the jade feather in your pocket. The fish are probably lying. She laughs, and it echoes down the path like wind in a flute. Eventually, you rise, exchange nods, and continue in opposite directions. A momentary convergence, like two brushstrokes crossing on a vast scroll. You reach a series of terraced steps carved into the hillside, where an elderly man leans on a walking stick, watching his goats wander and occasionally shout at clouds. Courier, he asks. You nod. Good. I have a complaint to file. You pause. About. The sun. Too bright today. Makes my soup curdle. You nod solemnly. I'll pass it along. He pats your arm. You're doing important work. The road winds on through fields of golden millet, their tops bobbing gently as if nodding in encouragement. You pass through a stone gate that marks the boundary of a new province. A small sign reads, Welcome to Maishan. Please do not feed the statues. You resist the urge to ask. Ahead, a cluster of trees provides welcome shade, and a small pavilion offers a place to rest. You sit and watch as a procession of ox carts creaks by, each carrying woven baskets filled with garlic, textiles, and gossip. Your duck dozes in the sun. You close your eyes and listen. Messages move. Feet move. The world, enormous and intricate, breathes around you. The next morning, you awaken to the soft clatter of bamboo chimes dancing in the wind, hung from the eaves of the pavilion where you dozed off. The duck is already up, standing at the edge of a nearby pond, regarding a frog with deep suspicion. The frog looks unfazed. You're not sure which of them is wiser. The day feels cooler, as if autumn is beginning to loosen its sleeves. You roll your shoulders, brush the dust from your tunic, and prepare to head toward the regional seat of Mailmen. A mid-sized town known for its poets, paper mills, and inexplicably competitive cabbage festivals. The duck resumes his place at your side, looking unusually focused. You suspect he remembers this part of the route. Or perhaps he's just anticipating breakfast. The road becomes stone-paved, lined with fragrant osmanthus trees. Their golden blossoms drift gently to the ground like powdered stars, filling the air with a perfume so sweet it makes you briefly forget the chafing in your boots. A traveling merchant passes, leading a mule cart heaped with bamboo cages full of birds, nightingales, thrushes, and even a very unhappy goose. Delivering to the governor's aviary, he says with a shrug. More fashionable than scrolls, apparently. Birds are hard to plagiarize, you reply. He grins and continues on. Not long after, you reach the outer walls of Mailmen. They aren't imposing, more decorative than defensive, really. With flower boxes lining the parapets and a gate flanked by carved lions whose chipped fangs make them look like they're grinning through a toothache. Inside the walls, the town is already stirring. You pass vendors unpacking bolts of dyed silk, children chasing each other around paper lanterns, and a man shouting something about discount ceremonial incense. Your destination is the regional postmaster's station, nestled between a tea shop and a building that smells aggressively of boiled vinegar. A modest plaque by the door reads, Office of Letters and Quarrels. The clerk inside is a round man with a brush tucked behind one ear and a permanent sheen of tea sweat on his brow. He waves you in without looking up. You the duck one? You sigh. Yes. He gestures toward a bench. Heard you were coming. The south route sent word. Nice work with the painter's scroll, by the way. We think he actually included fewer metaphors this time. You pull out the lacquer-sealed scroll and hand it over. He examines it with professional reverence and nods. This one's bound for the central court. High priority. We'll send it by hawk. The duck lets out a low, offended squawk. No offense, the clerk adds quickly. But hawks don't stop to nap in cabbage fields. You retrieve your delivery receipts, which include 3 new scrolls for the northern foothills, 2 for a border village, and 1 wrapped in cloth with a note, deliver discreetly. Do not read. Possibly cursed. You tuck it in with the others and decide not to look at it too long. The duck avoids it entirely, hopping to the opposite side of your satchel. Before you leave, the clerk hands you a new courier token, this one copper, etched with a plum blossom and your new rank. Second-level mobile agent, leftward branch. It's not prestigious, but it is official. You now outrank several couriers and at least 1 goose. Outside, the city continues its usual rhythm, bells ringing in a distant temple, street poets scribbling under awnings, a child dragging a kite shaped like a carp through a puddle. You sit briefly under a parasol and sip a ginger broth sold by a grandmother who insists it can cure foggy thinking and ungrateful relatives. The duck tries to steal a slice of yam from her cooking pot and is politely batted away with a ladle. You follow the main avenue north, passing the Paper Guild, a stately building where people enter with scrolls and exit with debts. You overhear an apprentice arguing over calligraphy ink quality and decide to walk faster. Near the edge of town, a sudden downpour surprises everyone. You duck under an archway as rain sweeps across the stone streets in silver sheets. Merchants scramble to cover their wares. A rooster runs for cover under a noodle cart. The duck stands in the rain, motionless, wings slightly lifted, as if to say, this too is my element. A girl beside you giggles. He looks like a storm spirit. You nod. He acts like one. Once the rain slows to a drizzle, you resume your journey, stepping over puddles that reflect the sky like broken mirrors. You reach the north gate, where a bored guard waves you through without question. Watch for bandits past the cedar line, he warns. They've been pretending to be monks. You give him a polite nod. I'll ask for a blessing before I get mugged. You and the duck head into the countryside once more, the city fading behind you. The sky begins to clear, sun breaking through in buttery streaks. Fields stretch ahead, dotted with scarecrows, some stuffed with straw, others made from broken armor and old festival masks. You offer a respectful bow to the nearest one. The duck hisses softly. Historians still debate the presence of courier scarecrows, decoys dressed like messengers to confuse bandits. Some say it was a psychological tactic, others argue it was just farmer humor. You wouldn't be surprised if both were true. You walk for a while in silence, your boots squelching just slightly, the duck waddling quietly. The trail begins to rise again, hills gently lifting the path toward your next destination. The far northern edge of the province, where rumors swirl of strange weather, strange scrolls, and stranger ducks. As you pass a tea bush thick with buds, a squirrel pelts you with half a walnut. You take that as encouragement. You climb. The air sharpens as you ascend, like someone took a whetstone to the wind. It's not quite cold, but there's a bite to it that whispers of elevation and approaching winter. The duck, perhaps sensing the shift, fluffs his feathers into a full tactical poof and hunches down like a particularly judgmental snowball. The path is narrower now, carved into the hillside with just enough width for a careful foot and, thankfully, one small waterfowl. Pine needles carpet the trail, softening your steps but offering little in the way of traction. Somewhere below, hidden in the misty ravine, a stream chatters endlessly, possibly complaining about rocks. You pass a traveler heading the opposite way, a wiry man in a straw cape with a basket of dried mushrooms strapped to his back. "Any advice?" you ask as you squeeze past. He eyes the duck and grins. "If the clouds start falling sideways, just pretend you meant to walk like that." You nod. "Anything else?" He leans in. "Avoid the tea house with the singing raccoon." You open your mouth, close it again, and decide not to pursue that. As you continue, snow begins to drift down, not much, just a flurry here and there, like the mountain is brushing dandruff from its shoulders. You pull your cloak tighter, the duck settles deeper into his fluff, and together you trudge forward. Up ahead looms a stone archway, half-collapsed, moss-choked, and bearing a barely legible plaque. "Welcome to Yunsu Pass." Elevation, don't ask. Beyond the arch, the landscape opens into a wind-swept plateau of rock and scrub. Far off, you can see a small cluster of buildings huddled together, smoke rising from one chimney. That's your goal, the outpost at northern Yunsu. The scroll marked "possibly cursed" is meant for the resident magistrate there, a woman known simply as Lady Fei. As you near the outpost, a sudden squall whips across the plain. Snow and dirt swirl in a sideways blast, and you duck behind a boulder, clutching your satchel. The duck is already there, tucked behind the rock like he's part of it. You could swear he rolled his eyes at you. The wind howls like a flute in mourning, the sky goes briefly white, and for a few moments you wonder whether this is what the ancient poets meant when they described cloud-buried roads. Then it passes. The air stills. A bird calls in the distance, sounding mildly inconvenienced. You shake snow from your shoulders and march onward. The outpost is closer now, 3 squat buildings made of dark wood and stone, huddled behind a low wall. You knock on the gate and are greeted by a man who looks like he was carved from the same rock the path was cut from. "Courier," he grunts. "Not a traveling puppeteer," you reply. He smirks and lets you in. Inside, warmth greets you like an old friend who still owes you money. A brazier crackles in the main hall, and a bowl of steamed buns waits near the hearth. The duck beelines for the heat and curls into a contented fluffball. Lady Fei enters not long after. She's taller than expected, dressed in thick robes stitched with gold thread in the pattern of clouds. Her hair is pinned up with a stylized jade quill. She eyes the satchel first, then the duck. "So you're the one with the assistant." "He handles scheduling and morale," you say, deadpan. She doesn't smile, but you detect the faintest twitch at the corner of her mouth. You hand over her scroll, the suspicious one. She accepts it delicately, inspecting the cloth wrapping without opening it. "You didn't read it?" she asks. "I was told it might be cursed." She nods. It might be. You wait a beat. Should I leave the room? No need. If it's cursed, it would have affected you already. Good to know. She places the scroll on a high shelf with tongs. That one's from the coastal prefecture, she explains. They send me updates written in metaphor. Mostly to avoid imperial scrutiny. Last month I received a poem about the jellyfish that whispers secrets into seaweed, which turned out to mean the local tax office burned down. You raise your eyebrows. Sometimes, she adds, I miss honest paperwork. As the evening wears on, she invites you to stay for supper. You share barley porridge, mountain yams, and a surprisingly complex tea brewed from juniper berries and licorice root. You talk little, but comfortably. The duck, full of warmth and dumpling fragments, snores softly near the hearth. After the meal, Lady Fay produces a thin scroll wrapped in pale green silk. Take this south. It's an unofficial reply. To the jellyfish? To the prefect, she replies. Tell him the seaweed sings back. You stow it carefully. Before you turn in, she offers you a hot stone to keep in your bedroll, a luxury for a courier who spent most nights sleeping on questionable mats or benches shaped like regret. As you lie down, the wind whistles gently outside the shuttered window. The duck shifts in his sleep, feet twitching. You close your eyes. Historians still debate whether outposts like Yunsu Pass served any real strategic value, or if they existed solely to give stubborn magistrates and weary messengers a reason to feel slightly heroic. Some say Lady Fay once arrested a bandit gang using only red ink and a tax audit. Others claim she used the scrolls to write unsent letters to ghosts. You believe all of it. Because here, under this roof, on this wind-bitten mountain, surrounded by mystery and steamed buns, the world feels exactly strange enough to be true. Dawn creeps across Yunsu Pass with deliberate hesitation, as though testing whether it's worth waking up at all. Pale light seeps in through the shutters, washing the stone floor in a thin silver glaze. Outside, snowflakes drift with no urgency, like they've all agreed to fall on their own time. You pack your things in silence. The satchel feels heavier, maybe it's the accumulation of scrolls and gifts, maybe it's the lingering weight of half-solved riddles and possibly cursed metaphors. The duck shakes off a bit of frost and hops up to your side, eyes clear, feathers fluffed, ready to go. You're not sure how he maintains such unwavering professionalism. Lady Fay sees you off at the gate, wrapped in a charcoal cloak with golden embroidery that flickers when the wind catches it. You'll descend along the southern slope, she says. It's less treacherous, assuming you don't insult any of the path stones. You blink. The stones? They've been there longer than anyone else, she replies without smiling. Respect them. You promise to do your best and begin the descent. The southern trail is indeed wider, but also oddly lined with carved stones, some shaped like small beasts, others like faces mid-laughter. You nod politely to each as you pass, just in case. The duck honks at one that looks particularly smug. You gently remind him that diplomacy matters, even with rocks. Midway down, you stop at a small cave to rest. The mouth of the cave is covered with wind chimes made of cracked porcelain and bent copper forks. Inside, an old woman sells ginger tea and tells fortunes based on how loudly you slurp it. You sip cautiously. She leans forward, eyes narrowing. Your path is knotted but moving. Like a fishing line tangled in duckweed. You glance at your companion. Seems accurate. She nods solemnly and gives the duck a candied chestnut. He devours it with suspicious enthusiasm. You leave a copper coin and continue down the trail, which soon merges with a pine-lined road that snakes toward the provincial border. By midday, you reach a fork marked by a shrine, small, stone, and covered in offerings, pine cones, poems, and something that looks suspiciously like a fossilized dumpling. You sit beside it and unwrap a rice parcel from your pack. It's filled with pickled mustard greens and crushed peanuts. A strange combination, but oddly comforting. As you eat, another courier appears from the west path. She's tall, carries herself like someone who's used to outrunning horses, and wears a bright blue sash that marks her as a Sky Route Express runner, one of the elite. She stops beside you, arches an eyebrow at the duck, and says, "Is that the one with the pamphlet scandal?" You blink. No pamphlets. Just passive-aggressive poetry and fermented soup scrolls. She nods, satisfied. Just checking. She takes out a map, studies it, frowns. You're going to the Whispering Post next, right? You glance at your delivery log. Yes. Hand off to the border agent. She folds the map and tucks it into her boot. Avoid the upper terrace. Last week it collapsed under a shipment of extremely judgmental opera masks. You thank her, offer her the second half of your rice parcel, and together you sit for a few quiet minutes, eating in silence while the wind stirs the pine branches above. Eventually she rises, nods once, and sprints off like the wind itself is chasing her. You and the duck take the lower terrace. The path winds through dry cedar groves and crumbling stone stairs that hum with moss. Small birds flit between branches, chittering like gossiping aunties. You pass an abandoned tea pavilion where someone has carved into the beam, "Send no scrolls, only stories." You'd like to, but scrolls are your job. A while later, you arrive at a crooked wooden tower, Whispering Post. Despite its name, the place is quite loud. The wind tunnels through cracks in the structure and creates an orchestra of soft whistles and low moans, as if the building is telling secrets in a language you almost recognize. Inside, a young official with ink-stained sleeves greets you. "Delivery?" he asks, flipping through a manifest scroll that seems to be longer than he is tall. You hand over two of your bundles, the painted reply from Lady Fay and the green silk poem meant for the poetic prefect. He checks the seals, nods, then unrolls a map and points. You'll continue south, past the old cedar grove and the carved lion bridge. There's a field station for overnight stay before the river ferry. You start to thank him, but he holds up a finger. "One warning, there's been strange weather." Define strange. He leans in. "Last night, it rained sideways. Upward." You blink. "And someone's laundry came back folded better than when it went out." You and the duck exchange a glance. Then you both nod. You leave the post and descend into the valley. The wind seems gentler now, as if taking a breath. The sun is a pale coin behind soft clouds, and the duck walks slightly ahead of you, leading with that same unhurried determination he's carried since the start. Historians still puzzle over the strange reports from couriers in this region. Some say the Whispering Tower's odd acoustics caused hallucinations. Others claim the scrolls themselves became self-aware. The most credible theory, however, is that sometimes long roads and tired minds make magic seem more plausible. And perhaps that's enough. The carved lion bridge appears just before sunset. The lions are old, worn smooth by time, but one still has a single gold tooth. You bow to it. The duck does not. Some things never change. You reach the field station as dusk bleeds across the sky in slow lavender streaks. The building is simple, a thatched roof, one brazier, and two beds made of woven reed mats and goodwill. The attendant, a sleepy woman who speaks mostly in grunts, shows you to your spot and lights the fire. You unwrap the last of your barley cakes and share it with the duck. Outside, crickets begin to sing. Somewhere, a bell rings, marking the hour. You lie down, cloak wrapped around your shoulders, and breathe in the scent of wood smoke and cedar. The duck snores. You close your eyes. The road continues tomorrow. You rise before the sun, not because of any heroic impulse, but because a rooster perched on the windowsill has decided to perform a full opera right into your dream. You open one eye and see the duck already awake, sipping dew from a bowl like it's a fine imported tea. The air is crisp, clean, and tinged with that quiet electricity that sometimes precedes change. You feel it in your knees, in the scrolls pressing against your side, and maybe even in the duck's unusually solemn expression. Today is the final stretch. The road will take you through the low riverlands and eventually to the gates of the capital, where your last scroll, sealed in scarlet wax and bearing the imperial sigil, is meant for the hands of someone with enough power to send 100 couriers racing in every direction at once. No pressure. The station attendant hands you a lukewarm yam and a half-muttered blessing. You thank her and set off while the sky is still painted with the long strokes of pre-dawn. The duck hops along in perfect silence, for once not honking, not muttering, just moving forward. The road flattens, winding between rows of cypress and fragrant fields of morning-blooming lilies. Dragonflies buzz in lazy arcs above your head. You pass a monk tending a shrine, who offers you a peach and a cryptic farewell. Do not let the paper speak louder than the heart. You're not sure what it means, but the peach is delicious. By midday, the road splits once more. One fork leads to a trading town, the other, quieter and less worn, curves through a bamboo grove known among couriers as the Path of Forgetting. They say if you walk it in silence, it will remove from your memory one sorrow and one secret. You glance at the duck. He tilts his head, waiting. Together, you step into the grove. The bamboo rises tall around you, the leaves whispering above like ancient scribes shuffling paper. You say nothing. The duck says nothing. And for once, the silence is not heavy. You don't know what sorrow you leave behind. You only know you feel lighter as you step out the other side. You pass the final ferry crossing just before the sun begins to fall. The ferryman doesn't ask your name, he sees the seal on your satchel and simply nods. The duck climbs aboard with the kind of confidence usually reserved for minor nobility and people who've just finished a successful nap. Across the river, the road rises in slow, gentle curves toward the outer gate of the capital. Chang'an. The city unfurls before you like a tapestry come alive, rooftops sloping like brushstrokes, banners dancing from balconies, voices and bells and footsteps in every direction. Even the air tastes of story, incense and iron and fresh ink. You move through the city with a strange calm. The crowds part for you, just enough. A few nod when they see the token at your belt, the satchel slung over your shoulder. A girl selling candied hawthorns offers you one for free. To the messenger who walks with a duck. You accept it. It's sour and sweet, like most things that last. You pass the Scholar's Gate, the Imperial Paper Archives, the Bronze Drum Courtyard. Each step feels both ordinary and epic, as if you're walking in the footsteps of 1,000 others whose names no one remembers. But whose scrolls reach their destinations all the same. Finally, you reach the gate. The Imperial Postal Hall looms before you, wide, high-roofed, and guarded by 2 stone Qilin who look like they'd prefer to be asleep. A clerk greets you, nods at your duck, and gestures to the inner chamber. You enter quietly. At the far end, seated beneath a mural of swirling clouds and flying cranes, an official awaits. Robes of crimson and bronze. Face unreadable. Hands steepled. You kneel, present the scroll, and wait. He accepts it without a word. Breaks the seal. Reads. A breath passes. Then he nods. Well done, he says, and nothing more. But it's enough. You exit into the late afternoon sun, the duck waddling beside you. He lets out a single soft quack that, somehow, sounds like a sigh of relief. You've done it. Message delivered. Road completed. And for the first time in weeks, you have nowhere to be. You stroll through the quieter districts of the city, stopping for a meat bun and a cup of jasmine tea. The duck curls up at your feet under the table. Street performers juggle pineapples. A cat chases a kite. The sun dips behind the rooflines, turning everything gold. And you let yourself feel it. Rest. Peace. A stillness earned, not found.